Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Morning Exiles Facebook Live broadcast on this, hey, it feels like fall.
It does. It's
Friday
amazing.
morning, yes, indeed.
Temperature this morning, 61 degrees as I was driving in.
Yeah, Karen flipped on the heater last night, and I went, no! But
Not the heater.
Not the heater.
See, we'll go through several more nights of just pulling the bedspread up over the sheets before I kick in the heat. I'm going to save the money.
All right, before we get into the real serious business, there is only one bit of media reporting that doesn't use the English language properly to report this morning.
Really? Only one?
Only one.
You haven't looked hard enough. But
no, I looked, but, I mean, I just hate to even do it because this guy's such a frequent flyer.
Okay, go ahead.
Go
ahead.
You know who you are. I am not... I'm getting tired of mentioning your name. I feel like your agent. But this guy is just such a frequent flyer with the tortured grammar, wrong word usage. This is a happy story, fortunately, about deputies from the sheriff's department and the mayor celebrating a local woman's 100th birthday.
Well, that's nice.
All righty, here we go. I'm going to read the sentence. It was all smiles and applause at a celebration Thursday, October 17th, where deputies from the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office presented Dorothy Lamar with a certificate of an amazing milestone for her 100th birthday.
Certificate of
an amazing milestone.
Did you say where in the beginning of that sentence? Where deputies?
Yeah.
Should have been when deputies?
Yeah. Like I said, this guy is a frequent flyer. I feel like I am. I originally wanted this to be instructional. And quite frankly, I thought it was good for a laugh as well. It shows the power of our local educational system. But this guy comes up every week at least once or twice. So I'm not even going to mention his name or where he works. Channel 9, Kevin Foster.
Wow!
That's quick.
Okay, just out him.
Well, how many times can I out him? This is the 7th time he's been mentioned on this podcast.
Wow, dude. Remedial English class. Just that simple.
Or just, please, someone edit his work.
You know, when I was a reporter, we were encouraged to keep an AP style book nearby.
You know what? I bet you they don't even know what that is.
We had tools. And,
what's another word for thesaurus, by the way?
I don't know another word for book of words. But we were encouraged to consult the style book and use a thesaurus, so we didn't keep using the same word over and over.
The whole point of this little segment
is to shame people.
No.
You're doing a good job.
No. If you remember, we had a little team meeting with some educated people who support this broadcast, and we said, look, the most important thing in news reporting is that you be accurate. And if you don't use the language properly, you are not accurate. And so you are failing on job one. And we were hoping that this would be somewhat instructional. Now, we have half a loaf, because on this particular offender and another one, I have noticed that the story stays posted with all the incorrect language or bad words, and then it gets edited the next day.
Yes.
So by tomorrow, you can go to the website and hopefully find the language cleaned up. But no, I mean, it really pains me to see this in media, and it's not just our local media. You know, there are national people who use the wrong word as well. They just don't do it quite as much, and in such simplistic situations. It's usually a little more complicated. But anyway, so that's it. We only have one today, Kevin. But like I said, the guy's a frequent flyer. Four more mentions, and he gets our free dictionary. He said, "Who's this book for?" It says Thorndike Barnhart on the cover. Anyway, we have serious business to attend to today.
Yes.
The brand new Our Lady of the Lake Children's Hospital had their grand opening just a few days ago. This has been a long time in the making. It is an important addition to the entire state, not just our region. And Kevin and I and a great many of you have been supporters of the Children's Hospital for a very, very long time. You've supported it with your time, with your effort, with your treasure, and it is certainly a showpiece of an already dynamic medical community here in Baton Rouge. Joining us now, Laurie Schulenberg. She is the Director of Patient Care Services for Our Lady of the Lake Children's Hospital, and she has, 3, 6, 9, 11, 14, 16 letters after her name. So she must know something.
And Laurie, I'm going to ask you the important question for the sake of the podcast. Are you an Lorrie or an Laurie?
Laurie.
Thank you very much.
The
So
proper,
that's the most important question.
the proper English
See,
spelling.
because God forbid I make a mistake now after that.
Right?
I have B-E-R-G or B-U-R-G?
B-E-R-G.
There we go.
I just got married last year, so I have
Well,
to think about that.
congratulations.
Thank you.
So what was your
That's
maiden
awesome.
name?
My maiden name was Lunsford, and then I was a Hartwig for 25 years.
So
and now
you're
I'm a
used to
Schulenberg.
having a name that's difficult to
That's
spell.
right.
Mine's Gallagher, so I'm right there with
There
you.
you
Yeah, it's like Karen was Jeansonne. She said she
Yeah.
did not trade up when she got Profita.
I'm like, couldn't I have done like Jones or Smith or something?
Oh, well, we are so glad to have you.
Thank you.
How is the transition going to Our Lady of the Lake Children's Hospital from a hospital within a hospital to the freestanding at this point? I guess that's the first question.
It's gone really well. It's complicated though. We went from an operating room within a bigger operating room system to having our own surgical services. We now have 4 operating rooms open. We're about to open the 5th, and we have a 6th that is shelled space. So kind of peeling all of that away from all of the support that we had at the main campus is complicated. We've opened up our own pharmacy, an individual lab, individual radiology services. So all of the employees who previously were part of the main campus have pulled away from all of those support services, and we're establishing our own departments. So it's complicated, but it's amazing.
One of the things that I learned and that I was impressed with many, many years ago when people at Our Lady of the Lake started talking about this children's hospital is scaling everything to small, child-sized patients.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that you and a lot of the other people in the administration, that has occupied at least 10 or 20% of your time for the last 3 or 4 years in getting that scaling done.
Yeah, and we always recognize that children are not mini adults, and that the services that you provide for them are very unique and have to be individualized for small patients. Everything from smaller blood pressure cuffs to wheelchairs. But the people that are working at the Children's Hospital are all professionals who've worked with children at the main campus, most of them for many, many years. So we're kind of used to that.
Now, there are some departments in a children's hospital that you don't hear about in a general adult hospital.
Yep.
For example, let's talk about the Child Life Department. What do they
Yes.
do?
One of my favorite departments. In fact, I always say that if I were to ever do it over again, I'd probably be a child life specialist because they have the best job in the world. But what they do is they help support our kids from the minute that they walk in the door with education about why they're there and with comfort and support. They use distraction techniques to help kids get through procedures less painfully. They help us to decrease the amount of medication that we give, sedation. They help kids get through MRIs and CAT scans without medication. They're really amazing. They go to school for 4 years through usually like an undergrad education department, and then they take a certification to be a child life specialist, and that's what they do.
Now, you're also, I saw a very, very brief photo of this. You also have a dedicated St. Jude treatment area.
We do.
Now, this follows the protocols of COG, the Children's Oncology Group, I would guess,
Yes.
and St. Jude?
Yes, there are 8 St. Jude affiliate clinics in the United States, and we are one of them. And we're the first one to have our inpatient and our outpatient St. Jude department all on the same floor. So what that means is previously, when children would go to the St. Jude outpatient clinic and then needed to get admitted to the hospital for some reason, they had to leave the clinic, drive to the hospital. Now they're all on the same floor of the hospital. So if they have to be admitted for some reason, they just walk down the hall They know all of the staff or similar, people that they see all the time when they come in. We have an infusion clinic there within the St. Jude Clinic because a lot of kids have to come in on a monthly basis to get chemotherapy or blood or fluids. So that all of that is right there within the hospital.
I have heard and I have read that a lot of attention was paid to the psychology of color
Yes.
on the inside of the hospital.
Yes, it was.
Tell us about that.
So, for example, the second floor, which is the brightest sun yellow you've ever seen, and that's the floor that my office is on, so you can't be sleepy for very long after you get there in the morning. It was painted yellow because most of the kids that are coming in there are coming in for surgery, and they get there at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and we want them to start to wake up and make it feel more like morning to them or more like daytime to them. The blue floor is our Peds ICU, and that's more of a soothing, calm color. Each of the floors in the hospital represent a different ecosystem in Louisiana because, as you mentioned, it's not just a wonderful place for kids in the community. It's great for all of the kids in the state. So it mimics or it represents different ecosystems within the state on each floor, and each floor is a different color.
Fascinating.
Now,
I like that.
Our Lady of the Lake has operated a children's emergency room for a number of years
Yes.
now. That has moved to the new facility.
Yes.
And I still hear people saying an emergency room's an emergency room. They can grab a pediatrician right away if they need to. But what is the real difference and benefit to having a dedicated pediatric emergency room?
Well, within an emergency room, which I'm glad that you brought that up because we want people to know that the Children's Hospital is the children's emergency room in the community. And we want people to go to the Children's Hospital if they have an emergency. However, we will still treat them at our other facilities. It's important that we make sure people know that. But what they get when they go to a pediatric emergency room is that they're treated by professionals, nurses, and physicians who are certified and specialize in pediatric care. So you have your pediatric emergency medicine physicians in a pediatric emergency room, whereas you have regular emergency medicine physicians in other emergency rooms. You don't have child life specialists in an adult emergency room, whereas we do at the Children's Hospital. And we have really tailored the emergency room there to take care of children. We have a fast track area where we try to get them in quickly. We really try to make the visit as least traumatic as possible for pediatric patients at the Children's Hospital.
Well, and again, I think it's important to say you have a subspecialist who is the primary care there.
That's right.
You have a male or female physician who is a pediatric emergency specialist.
That's what they do.
Board certified.
Board certified.
And this is not easy.
That's
But you
right.
also have, I know we have a pediatric orthopedist.
Yes, we have pediatric orthopedist. We have a pediatric radiology department right there. We have a room right outside of the triage area where if a child comes in and we suspect that they have a fracture or something going on with something orthopedic, we can take them right in there. They don't have to wait and go to a regular radiology department. If they go to one of our adult facilities, chances are that their wait is going to be longer because you have patients coming in that may be having, a heart attack or some kind of major medical issue, whereas if they come to the Children's Hospital, they're going to get treated faster.
Years and years ago, in the dark ages when we were still putting leeches on people,
We still do that.
Yeah, but they're new improved leeches.
We really do.
I worked in the ER at Cook County.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, and it happened once the snow was off the ground. You'd have some kid on their skates or on their skateboard or on their bicycle. They take a header and they do the classic cut right across
Yep.
the forehead, and they need stitches. And the parents look at the physician and say, "Doc, is this going to leave a scar?" And we finally started to realize you need a plastic surgeon that does pediatrics, or this 5-year-old is going to have a scar that they're going to hate when they're 12,
That's right.
15, 21. So I would assume you have subspecialists in every standard medical specialty.
We do, and we're growing those subspecialties. We just last week interviewed a new pediatric neurosurgeon. We're interviewing pediatric ENT specialists. That's one of our goals, is now that we do have the freestanding Children's Hospital, is to grow our subspecialties so that we can treat everything that might come our way in Baton Rouge.
I was watching a piece on television, and your hematology department is quite different. It looked to me like something out of a science fiction movie.
Oh, really?
How does that work? I mean, you're using these vacuum tubes to get samples back and forth from all over the hospital to one central location?
Oh, yeah. So that's our, it's called our Swiss log tube system. And we're able to now tube blood and tube narcotics through our tube system because it's badge access. So nurses and physicians and anyone in the hospital who has the ability to do that can badge to the tube system, and then we can send blood samples and stuff. And normally you have to walk to the pharmacy or walk to the lab or walk to the blood bank, and this prevents us from having to do that.
Now, as I remember the plan a year ago when the building was starting and all that, you have, is it one entire floor that is not finished out?
Yes.
That you can expand into patient beds, or if you want to start doing research, you can put your research
Yes.
labs in there as well?
Yeah, so the sixth floor of the hospital is not built out yet. It's just shelled space right now, so we're using it for storage, and we will be able to expand up there when the need grows. We are starting in probably January or February to grow our surgical NICU. So that's another shelled space that we have right now. It'll be a 10 or 11 bed NICU, and we'll start on that in the winter.
Now, not too far away, Women's Hospital runs a NICU, but we do have a need for additional NICU beds, unfortunately, in this city. We have a lot of children that are born in extremis, low birth weight,
Yep.
problems, and they need that intensive care unit. So do you also still have the neonatal intensivists that always fascinated me, that I don't know how these people do that every day?
So Dr. Trey Dunbar, who is the president of the Children's Hospital, is a neonatologist. He just told me last week, he's like, we got to get that NICU open because I need to take care of some patients. We are really looking forward to partnering with Women's. That's where I worked before I came to the Children's Hospital and have great relationships there. And we anticipate that they are going to help us with our NICU, probably even manage and staff our NICU, at least to begin with. And there is an opportunity for us to be able to grow some of the things that they aren't able or don't want to do. We can grow those at our facility and partner and help each other.
Tell everybody, and make it kind of simple, because it's confusing. What are the differences between a regular intensive care unit for kids, pediatric intensive care, and a NICU, a neonatal intensive care unit?
So a pediatric intensive care unit, for the most part, is children that are outside of the neonatal period. So babies that would go to the NICU are babies who are newly born and haven't been out of the hospital yet. So you might have a 2-week-old who goes home doing well and comes back into the hospital. Even though that baby is only 2 weeks old, it would not go back to the NICU because the NICU tries to keep their babies clean. They try not to bring anything from the outside community back into the NICU. Those patients have never been out into the community. And if a baby comes in, even if they're just a couple of days old, most of the time they're going to go to a pediatric intensive care unit because they've been outside of the hospital.
Now, when you have little bitty tiny babies in the NICU, I would imagine that it is a very, very high-tension situation for the caregivers, and probably a high-tension situation for the parents.
Yes, it is.
What kind of social services do you have at Children's Hospital for the parents who are sitting there wringing their hands and wearing holes in the carpet?
Yeah. Well, Child Life helps a lot, but we also have a social work department and a case management department that helps with those kinds of things. And the nursing staff and the physician staff are trained and very supportive of the fact that we're not just taking care of the patient, we're taking care of the whole family. We really have family-centered care. And we do all kinds of things, like we round on a weekly basis and go into the patient rooms and just talk to the parents. How's your stay going? What do you need? We provide meals for the parents if they're there in the hospital with the child, and we recognize that we are not just treating the the little guy in the bed, we're treating the whole family. And that's the difference also that you get in a children's hospital that you might not get in another facility.
So we've talked about the real high-tech, gee whiz kind of areas of Children's Hospital, but that's probably 25%. The other
Yeah.
75% is kind of general med surge, that
Yep.
type of thing.
Yep.
And what makes that so special? I mean, I see you smiling when I mention that.
Yeah.
You must think it's pretty darn special.
Well, those nurses, especially the nurses, don't get a lot of kudos. You know, the sexier, more exciting part of the hospital is trauma and the ICU, but those med-surg nurses and physicians they're the backbone of what we're doing at the Children's Hospital. And the reason that I smile is because those kids are out and about within the hospital, so you get to see them a lot more. I just ran into one of them yesterday down in the gift shop in her wheelchair with her parents, and she was going down there because the person who runs our gift shop, Robin Garland, is such an amazing support for our families. She rounds on the patient. She takes little trinkets and gifts and stuffed animals and balloons and things like that from the gift shop. And those kids are able to go to the playroom, and they're the ones that really make the job fun because we get to see them and talk to them more.
And how many inpatient beds do you have now? Because I've lost track with the projections and all that.
Yeah,
and I don't want to say something that's not accurate.
We have 81 inpatient beds, and then we have 30 ER bays and 18 PACU beds. All told, we have 147 beds, but we have 81 inpatient beds.
That is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And room
we're
to
full,
grow.
We're busy.
Yeah.
So it's been really busy since
Yeah.
we got there.
Let's talk about bringing in kids from outside this area. I know that Our Lady of the Lake Medical Center, the big hospital, has got a heliport, and it's pretty busy.
Yes.
Do you also have a heliport there, or will you take them across the street if they need to come in by air?
We have a helipad, yes.
Yeah.
And we bring in kids from all over the state. So I think our first day that we were open, we had a transfer from the Monroe area. So we get kids from all over the state every day.
Do you anticipate, with a normal growth curve, I mean, you've got 81 beds, you're busy. You know, it seemed from the news reporting that there were people banging on the doors 30 minutes before you turned the lock.
Yes.
People were ready for this.
They were.
Do you anticipate that you may eventually need your own air and ground assets strictly for Children's Hospital?
Children's Hospital. Well, right now we work really closely with Acadian Ambulance Service, and they provide most of our transfers. We do get some from ER, the EBR too, but Acadian actually, I don't know if you have seen it, but they fashioned an ambulance for the Children's Hospital.
They have a kids' ambulance?
They have a kids'
Oh,
ambulance.
cool.
That's awesome.
It's amazing. So it was at our ribbon cutting, our ribbon cutting ceremony. It's awesome.
We're going to have to get somebody from Acadian to come over here and demo that for us.
Yeah, it's great. So Justin Cox or Porter Taylor from Acadian, they've been great partners for us.
What are you hearing from the community now that you're open? Other than, boy, we're so glad you're open. Is there like, you know, I know there's not a little wooden box somewhere, but is there some sort of a suggestion box that you're hearing from professionals and parents and people who are interested in our medical community?
Yeah, people are asking for tours. I daily get people just coming up to me, you know, in public, or will send me an email and say, now that you're open, I really want to get in and take a tour, although I feel like we did 1 million tours before we opened. We're also we always solicit feedback, and we're trying to get feedback from physicians as well. You know, how is it going? What's going well? What could we do better? We talk a lot about rounding, but rounding is just walking through the hospital, and I round every day and talk to the staff. I was just telling someone yesterday that what I'm hearing from staff as far as complaints or opportunities is really low-hanging fruit. Like, we wish this door opened automatically, like not big safety issues or anything like that. So it's going really, really well.
How many other facilities of this scope are there, say, in the Gulf states? None?
Well, let's see, in Galveston, I'm going to say it wrong, but it's the medical branch.
Yeah, the UT Medical Branch. Yeah.
UTMB, that's what it is. Thank you. And Galveston is one of the closest. There are some other facilities. There is not another pediatric trauma Hospital. We just certified to become a pediatric trauma center. We're the only one in Louisiana. Probably Houston, Galveston, that's probably the closest.
So that would tell me that you anticipate getting children in from points east.
We will, absolutely, absolutely. And we now have a hospital in Jackson, Mississippi that's part of the FMOLHS system too.
You know, I remember years ago at a Children's Miracle Network radiothon, Children's Hospital of Little Rock is huge because
It is huge.
they have to serve not just the entire state of Arkansas, but basically 150 miles into all the neighboring states.
That's right.
And they actually at that time had purchased a large military-style helicopter to go with their small Bell Jet Ranger that they could actually do ECMO in the air
In
to
the air.
save a child's life.
Wow, that's...
Have we gotten with technology to where we really don't need that now, or is that something that might be on the wish list as we go down the road?
I would imagine that would be on the wish list. ECMO is one of the things that's on our wish list to do. We haven't implemented that at the Children's Hospital yet.
You need to explain that to people, because I'm using an acronym here, and I know what it is, but I realize that nobody knows what we're talking about.
It's extra, I'm probably going to say this wrong, but it's
Corporeal.
corporeal or corpuscular
Yeah.
membrane oxygenation. So what it is, it's heart-lung bypass is what it is. So if you have a child that comes in with severe asthma or an inhalation injury, or, I mean, it could be anything. It could be anything that affects the lungs in a very negative way. We need to give the lungs time to rest. So we put them on this machine that basically serves as the lungs for the child. And I won't get into the details of how we do that, but that is one thing that we want to start doing, because at this time, children requiring ECMO would have to go elsewhere, and that is definitely on our strategic goals to implement ECMO. It just takes a lot of specialists, a perfusionist, and lots of subspecialists to support that.
It is a fabulous facility. It's one of a kind, and I'm sure you're already anticipating the next growth phase.
Yes.
I don't know how you couldn't be.
Yeah, we are. I keep saying, like, I can't wait to start building out that 6th floor, because we're going to need it. And we have such big plans to do more and grow. We're already seeing the growth, and we're really excited about it.
Is there room in your footprint to add to the building? I mean, expand
Yes,
under
there is.
more space in the land?
There is. I think that the plan is to grow off of the 2nd floor over to it's really it would be the east side of the hospital, over the parking lot area. We're already planning to build additional parking space for team members. I have only been there for less than 3 months, so I'm still learning everything about our plans and what we're doing. But I know that they built that into the blueprints of the hospital, was a growth plan.
Well, congratulations on getting it open, and it is a
Thank
magnificent facility, and I look forward to seeing it with my own peepers sometime very soon.
Come see it. Let
Okay,
me know.
we'll set up a
I'll
tour.
bring you guys on a tour.
I'd love to.
Laurie Schulenberg is the Director of Patient Services at the brand new Our Lady of the Lake Children's Hospital. And Laurie, so when do you get more initials behind your name?
Yeah.
You have
done.
more initials than you have letters in your last name.
I know.
We're
It's a
gonna-
lot of tuition.
Yeah, lot of tuition. Well, you know, we talk about our attorneys here, Bryan Jeansonne sitting there, about being a man of letters. You are certainly a woman of letters, Bryan. I don't think you can match this. I'll show it to you when you come and sit down. I don't think you can beat this.
And Laurie, thank you for coming and joining us for a little cup of coffee and a little discussion.
Thank you. It was
And-
fun. I appreciate it.
Thanks to everybody, by the way, over the years, many years at Our Lady of the Lake and in the community that have worked so hard to get this done.
Well, we could not do this without all of our supporters, our donors and supporters. It's been an amazing mission.
Well, I'm thinking we're going to have some updates coming, and we would love to have you back with us.
I'd love to.
as we get a little further down the road.
That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Laurie, thanks a lot. By the way, this is that's me.
Oh,
That's her. There you go. Yeah, killed my mic, man. A little bit of related business. Brenda
that
is
on
watching
purpose.
us, and Brenda is elated to hear all about it. Her niece, Ashlyn Carter. Remember, we talked about Ashlyn
Yes,
last
we
week.
did. We talked about
6 years old, stage 4 lung cancer, and she asked if we wouldn't mind reminding everyone that there is a benefit for Ashlyn Carlock. I'm sorry, I got the name wrong. Ashlyn Carlock. That is tomorrow at Crazy Dave's in Livingston Parish on Highway 63.
Yes, please.
It's right in the town of Livingston.
Go by and buy a plate of food. Everything goes to offset
It'll be live
medical
music,
care and all that.
It's just going to be a big throwdown all for Ashland.
All right. Cash change here. We do this all live. We don't take commercial breaks. So we just roll right on through. Joining us now, someone who has a podcast of his own, but was always a frequent guest with Kevin and I when we were on Talk 107.3, attorney at law Bryan Jeansonne. Bryan, how are you?
I'm doing good. Good to be back. Have the old band back together.
Yeah,
Hey.
got the band back
Good
together.
to see you, by the way.
Good to see y'all too.
So, you are a general practice attorney, but you've also been doing an awful lot of real estate closing law and things like that. And one of the things we wanted to get an opinion on is, can there be changes in geography and the legal underpinnings to the geography with St. George? I'll give you an example. Years and years ago, a very punitive Metro Council told Country Club of Louisiana, which is now in St. George, or will be if it all stands up, well, since you have a gate, you can't have city streets. You have to take care of all your sewers and streets and sidewalks on your own, out of your own pockets. And that was simply a bunch of people saying, oh, you rich people, we're going to punish you for putting a gate up and making sure not everybody can just stroll through your neighborhood. Is this something that can be undone by the City Council of St. George, for example? These are the kind of questions a lot of people have.
Okay. Well, first, I wanted to say that we've gone to all real estate closings now. So that's the only thing I'm doing now is residential and commercial real estate closings.
Ah, very
good. Yeah,
good.
we've cut out all other lines of our practice because we've just gotten so busy with the real estate closings that we've had to just
Then you're the
focus
guy
on
to
that.
talk about real estate and regulations and laws, aren't you?
Yeah. So I don't really see anything changing in the immediate term with the formation of the city of St. George. I mean, things are pretty much going to keep functioning the way they've always functioned because a lot of the services are done on a parish-wide level. So there's not a lot of things that the city of Baton Rouge or the parish is going to say, we're cutting you off, you're done, you got to handle this kind of stuff on your own. So, I mean, a lot of things are going to stay the same.
But could they work it the other way? I would think that most of the gated communities, as I know them, are probably inside the limits of St. George, and they're probably all being treated exactly the same way. Mm-hmm. And can they go to the St. George City Council when that's appointed and say, we would like this undone under the new city government?
So you mean if to have the city of St. George taking care of their streets and
Yes.
things like that? They could. I mean, that's something that if the St. George City Council wanted to take that on as their responsibility, that's something they could definitely do. They probably wouldn't do that just because you would have public money going to pay for a private street, and so it's probably not something they would do. But I mean, it's something they could entertain.
Well, but again, it was made a private street by the government. For example, I live in a community that's got one way in, one way out, and it's got a guardhouse that is manned. But we do not have a physical gate.
Oh, yeah.
And so our streets and sidewalks and sewers are still maintained by the parish government.
Okay.
Now, if we were to throw up a gate for any reason or not, all of a
You'd be on
sudden
your own.
we own, and it was done by a faction of the council to basically punish people for saying, we're not going to need a lot of police presence because we're going to gate our community, and we're not going to have a lot of problem with people speeding through or wandering around looking to case houses. I mean, it was plain on its face what they were trying to do.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
They all threw up a collective 7-vote middle finger to Country Club of Louisiana some 25 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And if you remember, that council also had about 7 members that went to Club Fed.
Oh yeah.
Just saying. Just saying.
Yes, I mean that is something that the city of St. George Council could look at, and if they decide they want to take care of those kind of gated streets like that, they're free to do that. That's something they can vote on.
All right, now doing titles and closing and helping people with their real estate transactions, you do the abstracting on the property and all that, and you, as an attorney, say, it's clear, title's clear, you can buy this property, sign here. Is there going to be any change in assessments or anything like that? Anything that a property owner in St. George or in the city or a potential property owner for St. George might need to look for in the next couple years?
We don't know yet. I mean, like I said, in the immediate term, nothing's going to change. But I mean, if that city of St. George does decide to assess a new property tax, which they would have the right to do, then that would change that assessment for that area. But I mean, right now, the taxes will stay the same because there's no new taxes that have been imposed yet. But yeah, if they did decide to impose a new tax, like I believe Central when they formed, I believe they did tack on a millage, I think, for schools or something like that. So that is something that that city council could decide to do if they wanted to, or they could put it to a vote of the people in the city if they wanted to also.
Mr. Riles and Drew Merle and other representatives of St. George have sworn there will be no tax increase, that their city budget will be able to make it on the, some $48 million in sales tax.
Yeah, something like that, somewhere around there.
But it seems inevitable if the city's going to grow and the city government is going to need facilities, that they may need more operating capital.
I mean, that is very possible. I mean, it's really going to be up to those, newly elected city council members how they want the city to actually go, because they are going to control their own zoning. So they could, just kind of put a clamp down on zoning and say, we like everything the way it is. This is it. We're not going to, go on this massive expansion kick or anything like that, and not really zone new neighborhoods or developments or things like that. Or they could just say we're going to grow this city as big as we can get it, and kind of let the dogs out of the barn or whatever you want to say. Well, so I mean, it's just it's going to be really up to who gets elected to those positions and how they decide things go.
That's always situational too. It depends on what kind of properties you have available and who's interested in what they want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there was a little bit of a backlash in Central because of too much development. I think that might have been some of the reason that they kind of wiped the slate clean with all their city council people.
Big kerfuffle over an apartment complex that's I think currently under construction out there in Central.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, that could be that. Those same kind of things could happen in St. George. We just don't know yet.
Do you live in the area, or you live in city proper?
I don't. I live in I live in the city limits, but my office is in St. George.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So right there on Bluebonnet. So right on the edge.
It's definitely when you look at the vote, it was I want to say 54-46, was that it? So when you consider 46% of voters in the proposed city didn't want to be a proposed city. I mean, that tells me that there may be rough waters ahead.
Yeah, I mean, they could have some growing pains. I mean, it's a brand new thing, so it's going to be very interesting to have a new city that close to the existing city. So that's going to be a little interesting.
I'm going to ask you, suppose, with your knowledge of the law, if you were to sue to slow this or block it, what would be your argument?
I guess my argument would be that you're impacting the entire parish, but the entire parish didn't have a say on it. That would probably be the argument they would go with. And also, I haven't looked at the full petition. They could also go maybe the legal descriptions were not correct, because I'm not sure how they legally described the area. They could always go with that argument, too, that there was not a definitive description of the area in there, so that might make it invalid. I'm not really sure what kind of arguments they could go with. Those are a couple, though, that they could.
Well, it seems to me that that there are arguments that can be made. Now, whether or not anybody wants to entertain them after a vote of the people, that was. I think everybody agrees that the proscription on that was absolutely flawless in terms of what is required by the law.
Well, as required by the state constitution, sure.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone's really challenged those, because I don't think this has really come up before. So, I mean, there may be some things that get taken to the state Supreme Court, and we get a definitive answer on these kind of issues.
But you have other evidence that's been publicly stated that makes a counter argument. Yes, the whole parish didn't get to vote on it, but it affects the whole parish, and you've got State Representative Barbara Carpenter saying, well, but all these people generate all this tax money, and they don't want it shipped outside of their area to the inner city.
Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good argument in defense of the representative form of democracy we have and the people who are forming St. George. And she should not have said it.
Oh, yeah.
But that also...
wasn't it the other way around up until, the 70s or 80s? It was the other way around, where the city was funding the unincorporated areas and keeping them afloat?
So much of it was vacant.
Yeah.
But, I mean, when the tax collection started coming in, most of it got shipped to, as Johnny Rivers would say in his song, the Po side of town.
Yeah.
And somebody noticed and said, hey, we'd like a little more control over this, and people started calling them names and fighting them. Now, I know you have served in capacities on boards and commissions, in semi-governmental roles. What would you have done if 3 years ago your advisors came to you and said, inside the city limits, we might lose $42 million worth of tax revenue? Would your tactic have been to start calling them names and sending out pit bulls to argue with them? Or would your tactic might have been call them to the table and say, what can we do to make this right for you?
Yeah, I mean, looking back on it, that probably would have been the better tactic. Would it be, would be to say what can we do to make this right? How can we, make everything okay for you to stay as part of, I guess, the unincorporated area of East Baton Rouge Parish, not form your own city. Also, giving them the independent school district, probably would have been a very easy way to solve it. But because the legislature can do that regardless of if you have a city or not.
They could have okayed that ISD several years back.
Yeah, and so whoever it was, I can't remember who it was that made that comment about form a city and then come back.
Patricia Smith.
She kind of, I guess, caused the
You
problem.
saw what happened to her on Saturday.
Yeah, so that was probably, I guess, a dumb thing to say because that doesn't really have anything to do with independent school districts. Whether you're a city or not it's completely separate issue. So that was kind of something that she probably shouldn't have said because that kind of kicked off the whole thing.
It was an unwise dare, basically, and now we see where we're at.
What a lot of these folks don't understand what a great lie fight the power is.
Oh, yeah.
You don't ever fight power. You fight weakness.
Yeah.
Because you can win against weakness. That's number one. Number two, they don't understand the golden rule. And that is he who has the gold gets to make the rules.
Yeah.
They don't get that at all.
Yeah. And then depending on how these runoff elections turn out, getting that independent school district might not be as difficult as previously thought.
Now, I'm just curious what your thoughts are. Why hadn't the city sought to annex any of these unincorporated areas up until now?
Well, because the city can't. The city can't take anything.
Well,
they can't.
They can ask.
They
for
can
the
ask.
You have to ask to be annexed, but they can ask you to ask.
Yes, and I think they have been doing that. I just don't think they've been in a lot of takers. But I mean, now I think there is that jumping off period that we're in right now, where you can get annexed into the city or opt out of St. George if you want to.
Same thing with St. George. But I mean,
But don't you have to be contiguous with city limits?
To opt in, but I think you can still opt out and just still be unincorporated.
yeah, you can still be.
Okay.
You
All
can
right.
still be not yet canonized George.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things, and eventually it's going to end up being a legal discussion in front of somebody, or at least some portion of a textbook in a class. I think that one of the things that strikes me about the whole thing is that there was ample warning that this was coming. And they continued to make comments that were to their detriment. And I think one of the things that was most telling to me is when Buddy Amoroso died last June. And there was that circus of members of the Metro Council who tried to blatantly steal that seat because, in their own words, they say, that's the only way we're going to get it.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about his death being an opportunity
Yeah.
for Democrats of color. And what happened after that was the 3 largest days of requests for a petition in the history of the St. George movement.
Mm-hmm.
And the comment was passed to me that what people are saying is, I don't want to be a part of this blank anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that should have been an object lesson downtown, but apparently it wasn't.
Yeah.
And you ask why people opt in, and it's things like that.
Yeah, I just don't think people like to see that level of political gamesmanship on the local level. When you get so local as, council members, I think they just found it very distasteful when you see that level of politics going on, Because, politically, there was really nothing politically wrong with what they did. It was, I guess the smart political move. But when you get to that kind of, local level, people don't like to see that. People like to think that there's a little less politics. That it kind of seemed like a Washington, D.C. move.
Well,
and you shouldn't be playing around like that when you're talking about our local government. Mm-hmm. Is kind of the feeling that people got.
Although that didn't cause Rob Maness to leave the Republican Party. Did the Republican Party leave Rob Maness, or did Rob Maness leave the Republican Party?
Party by the left, Rob.
I love the
I think the party begrudgingly accepted him from the start, and was like, "Oh, you're leaving? Sorry."
I love the fact that Lane
please don't go.
Lane Grigsby told him not to run for office anymore, and that's what really made him mad.
Yeah.
I've still got that golden moment from his radio talk show saved as an MP3 somewhere. Rick.
Yeah.
You want to talk about melting down on the air? Holy mackerel!
And I think the voters pretty well communicated that he should not run for office anymore.
Yeah, when we had talked to Colonel Manus, on our radio program several times, and at first he came across as a pretty lucid dude, but the more we talked to him, it's like, yikes, this guy's out there.
Yep. Tinfoil hat started to show through.
He may show up on ballots as a libertarian. You never know.
Yep. Yeah.
Brian, let's take a few minutes and talk about your podcast.
Yeah. Okay.
How long ago did you launch this thing?
It was about a couple months ago that we started. So that's kind of the plan, is for it to be about once a month. 20 to 30 minute kind of podcast, and basically kind of the format we've kind of gone with is we bring in somebody who's in the industry. We spend some time just kind of getting their story, how they got in the business, why they love doing what they do, advice for people trying to do the same thing that they do. And then the next half is kind of, their kind of tips for a buyer or seller of real estate, particularly whatever their industry is. So like our first guest was Crystal Coppola. She's a residential realtor with Keller Williams. Mm-hmm. And so she kind of went through the residential side of things and what to do if you're, buying or selling an actual like personal residence. And then our next episode, we had Matt Laborde with Elephant Realty. Yep. He's a commercial realtor, so we kind of went through the commercial side of things. And so our next guest, which we should be recording that episode next week, is going to be Yvette Wheeler with Republic State Mortgage. So she's going to go through the residential mortgage process. And then our fourth episode will be a commercial lender. So you kind of get in the residential and the commercial side of things, and just kind of giving people, just kind of sharing people's stories, but also giving them information and kind of, opening up the real estate world to people, because being in the industry, you don't realize how kind of mysterious it is to people on the outside. They don't kind of really know how it works, and there's a lot of misinformation out there.
A lot of people are absolutely clueless. I share a home office with my wife, who is a mortgage loan professional, so I kind of absorb a little bit through osmosis, and it's a very complicated process, and there's a lot to keep track of.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and again, the fact is, you need your own closing attorney. I remember the second house, not the one we're in now, but the second house. The builder, said, well, we'll close, and we've got our closing attorney that'll represent both of us. I said, no. And he said, what do you mean no? Nobody ever told him no before. I said, I will have our closing attorney there. Mm. Well, why? I said,
don't you trust me?
Yeah. And as it happened, he got a little horsey at the closing.
Yeah.
And our attorney reached across the conference table and took his check.
Wow.
And changed his attitude quite a bit.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. So the podcast is called In the Abstract. So
In the Abstract. I
it's
like
on
that.
it's on Apple Podcasts.
Is it a video as well as audio?
We do have videos of it, but we haven't cut those together yet and put them on YouTube. But that is the plan. We have recorded every episode, and at some point we're going to put those on YouTube.
All right, give us the name again real quick.
In the Abstract.
In the Abstract.
And it's on, again?
Apple Podcasts.
Apple Podcasts.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, while we've got you,
Oh, yeah?
and we'll remind everybody your podcast again right before we sign it off at the top of the hour, I want to talk a little bit about party politics in Louisiana.
Okay.
I don't know if you are still an executive of the Republican Party. I know you used to be. You are.
I'm on the
Okay.
State Central Committee.
Well, that's fine.
For this area. Yeah.
What do you think of all the back and forth between the two Republican candidates for governor? And some of it was quite pointed. Some of it was quite nasty. Some of it stretched the actual fact to an absolutely tortured point. Does that impact the Republican Party generally over the state of Louisiana?
Now, you're talking about the back and forth going on right now between the runoff candidates,
no,
or before?
I'm going to get to that.
Oh, before.
that,
He's talking about Dr. Abraham and Eddie
Oh yeah.
Rispone.
Okay. I think it all kind of depends. I think they're like you saw in the Vitter race when Vitter and Darden and Angel were all fighting it out. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of animosity there. There actually were a lot of hard feelings after that one. Mm-hmm. I think this time around, I think people kind of learned their lesson and said, okay, yeah, it was a tough race and things got nasty, but now we got to come together and regroup and look at the bigger picture, and we can't let these kind of things hold us back. I mean, there's always going to be some people who are going to say, I can't get over the way that my guy was treated in the race, but I think generally people are going to come together and unite behind.
Here's my thing: if
the party
Ralph Abraham can get over it, and the very next day come out and be seen with Eddie Rispone and shake Eddie Rispone's hand and say vote for Eddie Rispone, I think that everybody else should be able to get over it.
I think so too, and that has a big impact too. What the candidate does, because it's ultimately they were the one that was attacked, or they were the one that had the kind of slugfest, and so if they can bury the hatchet and say I'm over it, that kind of helps their supporters come along too.
Now John Bell, and now we're moving forward to today. Now John Bell is attacking Eddie Rispone, and by the way, one of his Gumbo Pack ads has him Mr.
Tony Rispone.
No, has him Mr. Rispone.
Oh yeah.
Rispone?
Yeah, the announcer is obviously not from around here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But
that's why you should call Kevin Gallagher. I know how to pronounce the local name.
can you do female? It's a female announcer. But
Oh, sure.
But JBE is attacking Rispone because he's friends with Lane Grigsby, because of Lane Grigsby interjecting himself. We're going to get to this in a second.
Oh, yeah.
Interjecting himself into the Carter and Foyle runoff.
Oh yeah, that whole thing.
Yeah, it's.
When did Lane Grigsby become Simon Legree?
Oh, he's always been Simon
Well, I
LeGree.
know he's not some people love him and some people hate him, but now it seems like he's
Nobody turns down his checks though. That's another people.
including-
People saying like, "This is so distasteful," but it's like, weren't you begging him for a check last run?
including the governor. Yeah.
Let me tell you something. Lane Grigsby was on the airport commission, I believe, for 8 years, and I was there for every airport commission meeting during those 8 years, and I never saw anybody that had more efficiency, more attention to detail, more let's not waste time with all the flowers and flourishes and let's get something done than Lane Grigsby. And he puts his money where his mouth is. Let me tell you, he really does.
Well, and my thing is there have always been Lane Grigsbys in Louisiana politics. There have always been kingmakers. Why is that suddenly a bad thing?
Well, here's the real question, and there's differing opinions on this, because you have always, before the election, if there's 12 people in an election, there's somebody who writes big checks or operates within the sphere of whichever party that says, Kevin, look, all you're going to do is muddy the water. You're not going to win. You need to get out.
Here's $1,200, buddy. Get out of the race.
And it's not exactly that blatant, but they'll say, whatever you've got as campaign debt for signs and all that right now that is unfunded, that you're running out of your own pocket, we'll go ahead and pick up your campaign debt. But that's before any ballots have been cast. So I'm guessing the question, Bryan, your opinion, is there are people that are saying that because the ballots have been cast and there was a runoff, that Grigsby's offer, which was never relayed, to pull out, and he'll remember that you did the right thing in terms of making sure we had a Republican in the seat, and I'll go ahead and back you if you want to run for judge. Is that illegal, or is that just a little pointed?
There are some people that think it is. I personally don't think that it's illegal at all. Because,
Okay.
you can't offer someone something of value or money to drop out of a race or not run or anything like that. So that would be illegal. But
As Kenny Matassa found out.
exactly, yeah. But he was acquitted though, wasn't he? So
He was.
yeah. So,
Well, the jury was from Ascension Parish.
but nothing of yeah. For one thing, the offer was never communicated. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is he didn't really offer anything of value. I mean, it's very hard to assign a value to someone's support.
Well,
it could have a value. It could have
But
zero
if I were
value,
going to go into the
you know.
courtroom, and I would say, look at all the millions of dollars in checks he's written. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, but then we can go back to his win ratio, and maybe it's not that great. So
Yeah.
we don't. I mean, we don't know that you can really assign a value to the Lane Grigsby endorsement. I mean, does he really swing a lot of people?
Well,
and probably not.
And I
but-
mean,
Hell, there are just as many people who don't know who the hell we're talking about.
exactly.
right now.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, of all the successful, powerful people I have been fortunate, and in very few cases unfortunate, to meet in my career or to work with on projects, I think Lane Grigsby is a stand-up guy. Now, his problem is that he says what he wants and what he
Yes.
thinks,
Yeah.
and he doesn't sugarcoat it. But I think Lane is a stand-up guy, and I mean, he's using his own money to back these campaigns.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's anything that he's doing
And
that's
you know,
wrong.
and he
Yeah.
might, he might have told Dan. He said, "You get a hold of him today." And Dan's like, "You're not going to tell me what to do."
Yeah, exactly,
But I
yeah.
mean, that's just kind of the way Lane is sometimes. But I've always, on the other hand, found him to be a very cordial and genial gentleman. And let me tell you what, he's in a rough business, just like
Oh, yeah.
Rasponi was. Contracting is not
Oh,
an
yeah.
easy business.
Yeah, no, very cutthroat.
Yeah. So, but you don't think that there was anything illegal there?
I don't think so. No, I don't think anything is going to come of it. I don't think anything illegal happened. I mean, those kind of deals happen all the time. Just people don't talk about it.
The
but-
recount's done. Franklin is in.
Yeah.
I say case closed. Story's
yeah,
over.
exactly. Yeah. I don't
It
think there's-
was it was a fun 48 hours.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, something to write about.
Well,
Fill the newsprint.
We might say the same thing to Together Baton Rouge and Better Together and whatever other Rascal song they took a name from. The vote is in, the recount has happened, it's over.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Turn out the lights. Now, when it comes down to that race, is it safe to assume that all of Carter's votes will go to Foyle?
Probably not 100% of them. Carter had a lot of crossover support, so there were a lot of traditional Democrat voters who liked Carter. So
He's a good guy. I like him.
Yeah, so I mean, some of those will translate to Foyle, but probably not all of them. But I mean, it is a majority Republican district, so it's a pretty solid, safe Republican district. So
But
the
also-
likelihood is that Foyle will win.
Beverly Thompson is an immensely popular woman. I mean, she's well known in the community, and she's very, very popular. And I know Republicans who will vote for her just because they like her.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's an election like any other, so anything can happen.
Yeah,
so you just never
this
know.
isn't going to be a big landslide where all of a sudden in the runoff, Foyle gets every one, and it's 62% of the vote.
Yeah, but Foyle is also well respected.
Yes.
You know,
Yes,
he
person
is.
well liked, well respected person
Foyle
too.
is a
So
good
you know,
man.
Well,
He's
and
a
he's
good
it's
got
man.
a-
two good people in the race. So.
Yeah, he's got a record he can run on. Beverly is a newcomer. This is her first run for office. It probably will not be her last if she does not prevail.
I would encourage her, if she doesn't win this election, to try it again. Keep at it. Get back on the horse.
And it is a big office, so I mean, that will be a factor. The fact that she's a first-time candidate, because sometimes for those kind of Senate seats, they don't like to put first-time candidates in there. But it may give her the experience she needs to run for a state rep
But
seat
she
later.
also got
or
40%
something like
of the
that.
vote, too.
Yeah.
So, as a first-time candidate.
Oh yeah.
At the big house, as
Yeah.
it were.
While we're talking politics, though, I'd like to get just your impressions or what you think. We're going to be going into a new legislature where there's going to be a Republican supermajority in the Senate. There could be a solid Republican majority in the House.
Possible.
And we have the
supermajority.
choice: do we send a Democrat back to be governor, or do we put a Republican? What's at stake here as far as progress being made?
Well, I mean, if John Bell Edwards gets reelected, it's going to be a very hard working relationship with the legislature, considering that supermajority in the Senate, because the Senate was always the stopgap. That was where things lived or died was in the Senate.
But a
And
lot
now-
of people had the impression that Senator Ilario would basically just go to governor.
Of course, he would, yeah. And, this is the first time in 30, 40 years Ilario is not going to be in office. So it's going to be very different. And so it's going to be a very different environment. But I mean, I think we probably will elect a Republican governor just because, I mean, we were the outlier, as far as the southern states, we're going having a Democrat governor. And I think that was kind of an anomaly election when he got elected. And so I don't think he's going to make it through.
Now,
this time.
what's interesting in statewide elections is you've got two Republican incumbents, again, short-term incumbents, because it was special elections, that were forced into runoffs in a statewide election.
Yeah, that's not
That's
that-
a little unusual.
Not really, because you have that solid 35% Democrat vote, and so that's pretty much always going to be there. And so it's not unusual to have these kind of circumstances play out when you have multiple Republican candidates and only one Democrat candidate.
Are they in jeopardy in the runoffs?
I don't think so. No,
Don't think so.
because I just don't see. Like I said, I don't see the people who voted for the Republican candidates in the primary. I don't see them switching to the Democrat.
All right, well, before we
in
go,
the
tell
primary.
everybody again where
Into
they
the
can
runoff.
find your podcast.
Okay, it's on Apple Podcasts, and it's called In the Abstract. So,
In the Abstract.
so yeah,
Very
like
clever.
Yeah, like a title abstract. so,
Very,
yeah.
very clever. Attorney at law Bryan Jeansonne, always good to have you with us. And
yeah.
again, In the Abstract, his podcast. You can find it on Apple
Podcasts. yep.
Podcasts, and soon on YouTube.
Yes.
We will let you know when that happens.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. In the meantime, thanks for joining us. Have a good weekend. We will be back on Tuesday, and we've got Councilman Matt Watson.
Councilman Matt Watson, who represents District 11 on the Metro Council, which straddles both the area that will be St. George and city limits.
I love straddling.
Representing both is going to be one of the things he's going to talk with us about.
He's going to bring the whole band, right? Horn section and everything.
You bet.
All right. So, for those of you It'll be a good day to watch some football tomorrow. I don't think they're planning on having any rain up in Starkville. We may have a little bit of it here, but enjoy the fall weather and have a good, safe weekend. Come back Tuesday. And remember, you can tell your friends the Morning Exiles Facebook page. They can watch this anytime. And on YouTube, it's called the K&B Podcast because somebody that I've not had dispatched yet took the Morning Exiles name for YouTube. They won't be a problem. I'm calling my cousin Louie.
One more thing. We'd like to thank La Divina, Lance and Mary LeBlanc for their hospitality every Tuesday and Friday morning. And if you haven't visited La Divina yet, please do soon for breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Wonderful place. La Divina Italian Cafe.